go to Tiana Lowe right now of the Washington Examiner. Great read of all things politics and trends. You know, Dan, he might feel confident in that. The president might feel confident of that. But there was a sort of a dismissive attitude to this, sort of lumping it up. Well, these are just Republicans making hay of this. Last time I checked, a lot of Democrats were making hay of this. So you got to be careful, right?
Absolutely. And let's just recap this timeline here, right? So these Biden attorneys who may not have had security clearance to see these documents found them on November 2nd. The election was on November 8th. This did not leak until 68 days after November 2nd. And so there's a crucial shift that I'm seeing, not just in the coverage of this at large, right, but specifically the White House correspondents turning specifically on how the White House has communicated this, right? You're seeing a lot of leaks right now about Karine Jean-Pierre, the press secretary, because in a way, she's almost the scapegoat for it, right? She goes out on the podium and asserts that there will be no more documents, none. And then what happens a couple days later? They find more classified documents that Biden had. And remember, not to compare apples and oranges, but unlike Donald Trump, Joe Biden, as the vice president, did not have the power to declassify these documents. So yes, it just reeks of classic D.C. corruption, right? This is a very ordinary D.C. story. And, you know, it's been, 8 years since the Hillary classified documents thing. So at this point, it feels old and stale and gross, I think, to just the casual observer of politics. And, you know,
Tiana, I'm not going to get into the weeds on this or assign stimata to either the investigation going on with Donald Trump or the one now just starting on Joe Biden. But I do know in the beginning they say, oh, well, our case is much different. It doesn't involve nearly as many documents. We immediately cooperated. But to your point at the outset, I think it's an important distinction when we get a TikTok on this, that they were not originally cooperative or clear, or for that matter, honest, that they were aware of this back in early November. And to your point, it didn't become fully vetted and out there for another 68 days. So I am just saying, in the course of this, they raised serious questions about how forthcoming they were, while at the same time talking about Donald Trump and how unforthcoming he was and how uncooperative he was. So you got to be very, very careful. Karma rhymes with witch, but it comes back to bite you if you put yourself up on an altar and it turns out that you shouldn't be up on that altar.
Absolutely. And let's be clear, the document scandal was probably the closest thing that Democrats hoping that they could, prosecute Trump's way out of the Oval Office. That was probably the closest chance they really had, right? The January 6th stuff, while it's politically egregious, the criminal charges are vague in terms of nabbing a conviction. The documents thing could have actually happened, but now it's probably not going to happen. Look, this isn't an issue about whether or not Biden is going to be charged with anything because he's a sitting president, right? And no one's saying that the magnitude of the documents that Biden had is the same as the myriad that Donald Trump had.
We don't know.
But
the bottom line, we don't know that, right? We don't.
We don't know yet, right? Because it's been very opaque in terms of how they've done it. The fact is that when Biden's team, his private legal team, contacted National Archives, the DOJ didn't come and oversee the rest of this document extraction, right? Biden's personal attorneys got to do it. And again, I don't think they had the security clearances to do so. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong there. And who runs the DOJ nominally? It is Biden's DOJ. This is what happens when you have part of the executive branch supposed to be holding another part of the executive branch to account. There is not much oversight here, and Biden can claim that everyone's objective. He can say Merrick Garland is being objective about this because he appointed that special counsel, but everything was concealed for 68 days, crucially during an election and then also during that special runoff in Georgia that determined, the Democrat Senate margin. So it does look shady, and it also really undercuts one of the strongest arguments against Trump, not just politically in terms of corruption, but also practically, right? There's no way that Trump's going to be charged now, at least to the extent that he would have been before.
And, and finally, my producer's going nuts, but I love really picking this story apart, Tiana, with you. you're too young to remember this, but I always go back and I remind my also very young staff about the Peter Falk Columbo character, the 1970s, who scratched his head and said, all right, in this case, if he were doing this today and looking at this today, he'd say, Mr. President, you said that you don't remember a lot of this stuff and what documents are involved and how many were involved and you were surprised to show up, then how can you at the same time say this is a lot better than the Donald Trump situation? Bottom line, you're confusing people, and it's that inconsistency that gets us back to the there that's there, because he put it there.
Absolutely. And I mean, the best thing Biden can probably do at this point is feign ignorance, right? I mean, the man just turned 80 years old. He could claim he's having a senior moment, right? But the problem is that his comms team is clearly not on board with this. He needs to get his press secretary in line. KJP needs to say, I won't comment on an ongoing investigation. We don't want to look like we're running interference, rather than giving these definitive statements, because it's clear they don't know how much more is to come. They don't know, not even just to throw the external wrench into this, the Hunter Biden thing, the fact that Hunter Biden clearly had access to this.
Wild
that could
stuff.
be another political scandal brewing.
Wild stuff, Tiana. And thank you for indulging my Columbo analogy. Tiana Lowe, the Washington Examiner, great read and breaking things down. And that's all.